My name is Patricia Delich, and I'm with OHSU. And I'm going to close the door because I'm easily distracted. And besides, we're doing something with audio, and we want to have a nice sound in here, nice quiet sound here. So, okay, so I'm going to be talking. If you came to the last presentation with Eric, he talked about classrooms, and I'm going to be talking more about one-person recording, not doing a classroom. So, and talking more about like the voiceover. But before we do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background so you know where I'm coming from. I'm going to give some general guidelines, and I'm just going to cover a little bit about mics and recording because you got to know, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page before we talk about the voiceover tips, and then we'll have Q&A. But if you have questions, please use the box, the question box. So I've been working with educators for many years developing online courses, and it got to a point where they wanted to incorporate video and audio in their courses. So they came to me and they asked me to help them, and that's how I got started. And I wasn't doing voiceover, I was helping them do voiceover with their, we would make voiceover videos and whatnot for their online courses. So that I got started working with faculty. And then I became a documentary filmmaker with my husband. We made a documentary film, and I got to be the narrator. And I had not ever had any training. I just narrated this feature-length documentary. And so that was a very interesting experience. I also did all the sound recording, and I was the sound guy, basically. I did the post editing for the sound as well. And then people really liked our documentary film. They're like, make another film. I'm like, yeah, we were independently funded. And as you might guess, that's kind of, it's hard to just keep cranking out films. But we had lots of stories we wanted to share, so we decided to do a podcast. And I was very excited about that because it's all audio. So I got to play a lot more with audio. So we produce it ourselves, we write the script, I narrate it, and we both do audio editing. And I just have to show this because we got our film shown at Hollywood Theater in Portland just this week. And so this was a really exciting moment in our life. So I just wanted to share that. So before I go on, if you could just briefly tell me how you use audio. If anybody, are you using audio in your work?
Just audio or audio and video?
Well, you could do both, sure.
We have some online faculty who record just audio, but most of them are doing like voiceover, PowerPoint kind of things where they're recording in their office or in our space. So
voiceover, PowerPoint. Yep. Anybody else have anything different? That's a real common one. So let me. Backwards, okay. So these are the three typical issues that I always find. The recording level is too low, the mic is too far from the mouth, and there's lots of background noise. So between all those three, the audio can sound really crappy. So these are my three big things that I want to be talking about alongside when I give you the voiceover tips as well. So what I'd like to do is play a couple of examples, and I'd like you to tell me what you hear and what the problems are or what you like. So let me find we had a little issues here with the technology, so I had to switch computers here. So, and there we go.
I'm thinking back to what prompted me to do my hybrid online basic drawing class. I had been teaching basic drawing continuously for 17 years, and at that point I was curious about using a different format. It was a way of keeping things fresh for me.
So tell me, what do you hear in that? Yeah. So in a lot of our spaces, it's really hard to find a quiet place to record. Believe it or not, that was the most quiet place I could find. And it was still not very quiet. And I was using a really crappy mic. We didn't have much. This was at a community college, and you just kind of had to make do with whatever you could find. Now, many years later, I'm thinking, oh, you know what I should have done is maybe gone to the music department and used one of their practice rooms. You know, if there isn't any students practicing, that could have been a little bit quieter of a space, but you know, that's the way it goes. Okay, so now I'm going to play another short clip here, and I want you to tell me what you think on this one.
Ticks in the woods here. Our ticks are not the ones that can really give you diseases and stuff like back east, but nobody likes ticks. You want to get them off of you, right? So yeah, we did have the experience of coming back. The tick really did walk across my hand, but I thought it was going to be fine to go to bed. And
so tell me how do they compare? What do you hear different between the two? Yes, better recording, microphone, recorder, everything. So yes. So okay. And I'm a Mac person, so you'll have to just be patient with me as I try to get this to come up. I don't know why it's not coming up. Double clicking. Well, it's not coming up. Oh, here we go. There we go.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. So here are some, I just want to lay some groundwork here, some general guidelines. And many of these you might already know, but it's so surprising when I'm doing this work, how many times people don't pay attention to these tips, like keeping the mic close to your mouth and not going off mic, because you can really hear it when you go off mic. When you move your head, it really reduces the quality. I also recommend, again, this is not for field work, this is for doing voiceover. Don't hold the mic because you'll get handling noise, so you want to put it on a stand. Always use headphones when you're recording. You want to be able to hear what you're recording. And before you start to record, stand in your room and listen and listen to what you can hear. Sometimes, like here, I'm hearing fan noise, and that's very typical with rooms. But also do a little test recording and then listen to it, because you might hear something different than just standing in the room listening. Because you're not going to be able to fix it in post if you've got something like that. It's really hard to deal with. The other things you need to watch for are clothing noise, hair noise, if you have long hair and it's brushing up against the mic, jewelry. I usually take jewelry off. So also, I'm known for like unplugging refrigerators and taking batteries out of clocks. You can hear that stuff. Mics are very sensitive. So try to find, again, the most quiet room that you can. If you have a room that has a lot of echo, it's going to be poor quality. If you were in the last session, Eric played some clips that you could hear a lot of echo. So if you have a small room or an office or a closet, that's the best place to go. Some people I've even seen will build a box, get a box and then put foam in it and put their mic in there and record. That doesn't feel real comfortable to me, so I don't do that. But I've used foam. When I was doing my documentary film, we were just starting out. We didn't have a whole lot. I have much better equipment now, but I used my futon, my foam futon. I built like this little enclosure for myself, and I just used a little Zoom recorder, and I had a really good mic though, and we got a pretty decent sound on that. And does everybody know what room tone is? Anybody not know? So it's just basically you want to record a little bit of the room, and even if it's the same room on a different day, it's going to sound different. So you want to do it when you're recording, and you might need to use that when you're editing to give a little bit of space if somebody's talking too fast or whatever. You need to pace it a little bit more. So I'm going to just briefly talk about mics. This is not a technical presentation, but if you don't talk about mics, then that's a really big part of doing voiceover. You really need to know something about mics. So for podcasts, a lot of people use USB headsets, and they're not that expensive. So it's a really good investment to have something, get the highest quality you can afford. And if you can keep the mic about an inch from your face and place it a little bit lower, slightly below your lower lip, you'll get a little bit better sound. So a lot of people like to use their iPhones or their Androids for recording. So if you do use your phone, get an external mic and don't hold the phone, put it on a stand. Again, this is not for being out in the field when you're doing something, when you see something, you're on vacation or whatever, and you just hold your phone and you want to record something. I'm talking about just another way of doing a recording. So here is a setup, external mic on a stand. So when you're doing a voiceover, this would be a kind of a setup that you would want to do. So USB mics, again, is another real affordable way to go. It plugs directly into your computer, and you don't need to buy any additional equipment. But they're not as versatile, and they don't sound as good. And what's the problem with this one? It's far from her mouth. So you want to have it closer to your mouth. See how close this is to my mouth. So when I'm this is not on, but like when I'm recording, or maybe it is on. I didn't realize it. So I would have it like I usually do this. That's what they recommend. So I did go to voiceover school. I did take some classes, and that was one thing that they always said, have your mic about this far from your mouth. That's an easy way to figure that out. I'm just going to briefly talk about some more professional mics, dynamic mics. They're more expensive, but you need to get an audio interface. It won't plug right into your computer because it has a XLR cable, so you need an audio interface. But it has a better sound, more natural sound, and it does handle background noise a little bit better. But like I say, it is more expensive. So you may. Is anybody using these kinds of mics with their work? Yeah, got a few people. There's the dynamic mic, and there's also a condenser mic, and this is the one that I use for my voiceover. And again, they're professional, more expensive, need additional equipment. They're very sensitive, so it picks up like a lot of noise. So like mouth noise and stuff. So you have to be really thinking about how you're using it because it will pick up everything. More susceptible to vibration and plosives. Everybody know what a plosive is? Like when you pop your P's, and then there's the S's when you have to say S's a lot. That's always fun when you're doing voiceover. So again, when you're doing voiceover, you want to put your mic on a stand. You don't want to hold it while you're doing a voiceover. Or if you have a lav, that works well too. Here's a mic on a swing. Actually, this is kind of my setup. And so I can just swing it out of the way when I don't need it. A couple of things that I've seen a lot of people do when they're first using mics is that the manufacturer's label is on the other side, and they're talking, they're going, my mic isn't working. There's a right side and a wrong side. So you want to make sure you've got the label facing you, and you want to talk right into the belly of the mic. And pop filters. On these last 3 slides or so, you've seen pop filters. They make a big difference. I was recording somebody remotely, and well, he was recording himself actually, and he sent me the files, and he didn't use a pop filter, and I had to do a lot of work to try and lessen his P's and his popping P's and whatnot. So they tell me that smiling when you're doing your voiceover helps a bit, and I always feel really self-conscious. when I'm recording and I'm smiling. But then again, nobody's in the closet with me, so nobody can see me, but it makes a difference in how your voice sounds. So I want to talk a little bit about recording, and there's two different ways that I'm going to talk about. One is using a software right on your computer, and the other one is using hardware and then transferring it over. And again, these are the ways that a lot of voiceover professionals do it. So I'm going to talk about 3 different kinds of softwares. There's a million, not a million, but there's lots and lots of different kinds of recording software you can use, but I'm just going to talk about 3. I'm going to talk about one that's free, one that's mid-range, and one that's high-end. So this one is Audacity. Does everybody know Audacity? Most people do these days. It's free, it's open source, it's cross-platform. A lot of people like it. I used it with faculty because it was free. But now there's this one called Reaper, kind of a funny name. If you Google Reaper, you get something different than the audio software. So you have to say audio, so a DAW, basically, Reaper, DAW being digital audio workstation. So this is mid-range. It's about $60. You can get a free 60-day fully functional evaluation. And I have a client who's becoming a voiceover professional, and she wanted to learn how to use it. So I've been helping her. And I told her I don't know the software, but it's pretty easy to learn, and she likes it a lot. The one that I'm using is not the one that I recommend that you use. It's just I use it because I'm familiar with it. And that's what I recommend you use. You use whatever is the most comfortable for you. If it's software or hardware, whatever it is, there's really no one right way, as long as you get your mic close and you do follow all those other tips that I was talking about. So I use Pro Tools, and it's pretty expensive. They do have academic pricing. I'm not sure what it is these days. I got mine many years ago, but I'm just real comfortable with it. It's industry standard for filmmaking, doing sound for film. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so when I got into podcasting, it was real natural for me just to use Pro Tools. So I'm continuing to use that. What do people here use? Are you using software?
So did it 16.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Sound edit 16.
I use Adobe Audition. I have like the education suite for Creative Cloud, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of tools, but it's a lot of flexibility, and you can pretty much use lots of different filters to cancel out like background hisses and pops. So I love it. I mean, and it's also great because Adobe has a lot of tutorials to help you learn how to use it. So Audition's been good to me.
Anybody else? The other thing is that there are a lot of great tutorials on almost any software that you want to use. But on these 3 that I mentioned in particular, there are video tutorials out there. So, and then the other method is recording using software. And these 2 devices are the most common that I've seen people use, Tascam and a Zoom recorder. The one on the bottom, the Zoom, is what I use to record my narration for my film. And it was just what we had. And it's got XLR inputs, so I was able to plug in my mic and get a pretty decent sound. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't see.
No, sorry. I was going to say, I use Studio One. It came free if you buy like an audio interface. So if you're buying a whole setup, it's PreSonus sells like audio interfaces. So if you have to buy one of those, PreSonus is not a bad idea because it comes free with Studio One, and that's a pretty powerful one. So just an option.
Is there anybody else? Are people out there using Tascams or Zooms? And you're having a pretty good result? Yeah. So then you just pop out the card and you just pop it into your computer. It's pretty easy. So the next thing I'd like to do is actually now get into some reading tips. And I'm going to first talk about some basics just to, again, make sure we're covering the basics here. So having a script is really important. That first clip you heard, even though the audio was really bad, she had a script. So, and you all know that it's so easy to go off and forget where you are. So having a script can really keep you right on point. And the other thing that's great about a script is, can anybody guess? Yes, you have captioning or a transcript already made, so it's really great for that, having that be accessible. One thing about writing for narration is you want to write for the ear, not the eye, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. So if you do a bunch of read-throughs on your script, you'll start to hear what feels awkward to say and what feels more natural. So make changes, but you really want to practice. The only way you can get better is by doing it. So just keep making, like I keep making podcast episodes. We've got about 34 of them out now, and each one I learn something more. So the more you do it, the more natural you can sound, and you don't want to sound like you're reading, because that gets kind of boring. So you want to try and speak as naturally as you can. I prefer to stand than sit. When I first started, I didn't know anything, and I sat, and I just didn't feel right. And so I just started standing, and then I found out that that's the way you do it. You stand. But if you would prefer to sit, just sit on the edge of your chair, and that'll give you a little bit more energy. Don't eat before you record, and you don't want to be starving either, because you don't want to have growling sounds. And drink lots of water. That will help as well. So to get a more dynamic read, first of all, you just got to let go of it being perfect, because you know what? It's never going to be perfect. I've tried being perfect, and I keep failing at being perfect. But you know, people like our stuff. You know, they come out and they listen to it, they download it. So just do the best you can. There's no one right way to do that. Got lots of tips to point you in the direction of getting, good sound. But there isn't really one right way. You'll find your way. Warming up is very important. There's an app that you could get called Activate Your Voice. This is the school that I went to. This is what she made. And it's just some warm-up exercises to do before you start speaking. And if you think of your script as a conversation rather than as you're reading a book, they often talk about, at school, they often talk about like really visualizing what you're saying, because then when you visualize it, it comes out of your mouth a little bit more warmer and more like they can actually see what you're saying. So also, I try to visualize somebody that I'm speaking to, and not just a blank wall, and that helps as well. Thinking of the mic as somebody's ear is another nice tip. So what I did was I went through all my notes, and I pulled out what I gleaned to be like the best I thought that I could pass on to you. So that's what these are, these tips. No matter how you're reading, always go slower. People read too fast. If you go slower and you use pauses, it's going to be more dynamic. So you can see I've got a script up here, very famous script that I found, where it's been marked up with, you can see the hashtag, what would you call them? No, they're not hashtags, they're just, what do you call them? I don't know, just lines, the lines. So like 2 of them would be a certain amount that you would wait, 1 might be less, 3 would be a little bit, giving it a little more pause. So as you're doing your read-through, make some markups on your copy. And the other thing that I do is, like, if I have a word that's really hard to pronounce, I also will make a note of that. I had to speak Gaelic, and that's not one of my languages. I've had to do Bulgarian, another one that's really hard. Languages are not my forte, but I just, I would write it out phonetically and the great thing about doing it as a recording is I have total control. I can go back and I can redo it, and I can just edit it and fix it up so it ends up sounding a little more natural. So mouth noises. Do people know about mouth noises? Do you know what that is? Oh, pops and clicks that I hear professionals do that. Now that I'm really clued in, even like on NPR and whatnot. I hear my own, and when I've worked with a vocal coach, she's like, don't worry about it. I don't hear it. It's like, well, I hear it. Maybe it's my very sensitive microphone. But there are some tips. One tip I don't have up here that it's not ever worked for me, but it works for other people, is eating a sour apple. If you like sour apples, eat a sour apple before you do your narration, and that's supposed to help. And smiling, again, I talked about that. Opening your mouth wider, but when you're doing narration, you don't want to be talking like this. You want to open your mouth anyway, so that can help with mouth noises as well. And I talked about marking up your copy. Yes.
What are the notations there that you've made?
So those are different ways of emphasizing. So I did not. This is not my markup. This is just an example I got off the web. So, you mark it up however it makes sense to you. So something could be more of an emphasis or an issue. Sometimes I'll circle something if that's an issue in terms of a word that I might not know how to say very well. And then, of course, the lines are more for pauses. I always, when I'm reading, when I'm narrating, I will give myself a lot of space because I can always bring it together. And then if I've done room tone, I'll have something that I could cut in case I missed out on something. So more things. These are really, a lot of these are things that happen in your head. Reading from your heart and your gut and not your head. I mean, that's more of a physical kind of thing, more than you can really do, maybe with your head. But I get my whole body into it. So when that's what helps when you're standing, because you can really just move your body without getting off mic. You learn how to be able to speak on the mic, but still be engaged with your whole body. And I found that as soon as I look away from my copy, I get messed up. So you always want to keep your eyes on your copy. And it's not about the words that you're saying, it's really about the story. So think of it that you're telling a story as you're reading. Some more ideas in terms of getting a dynamic read are really kind of going more slow at the end of a sentence and softening your words. Reading phrases instead of individual words, unless you're really trying to emphasize something. Don't attach the same importance to every word, and you also want to mix it up with levels and pacing. So some of this might be more for a kind of a dramatic kind of read than maybe an educational type of thing, but still, even doing these slight little tweaks to your read can make the difference between something that sounds monotone to something that sounds a little bit more alive. And this whole idea with stair-stepping, do people know about stair-stepping lists? About that concept? So often in something there'll be like, okay, there's oranges, apples, bananas, and grapefruit. And doing this helps you get through those steps instead of kind of rushing through it. So that's just a little technique that seems to work for me. So, questions? Okay, well, let's pass him the.
Me of the Wild Kingdom television show back in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
The narrator from that show was unbelievably monotone. It's almost comical to watch that show.
It can be a technique, I suppose, if you're doing some kind of drama, but like if you've got some information you're giving, you want the students to learn, you don't want to give it in a monotone because then it's not receptive as well, I think. Yeah.
So when I do voiceover work, I often don't have one space to sort of do it in. It sort of is wherever I'm able to. And I struggle with, since I do stand for most of my voiceover work, I struggle with finding a place that's comfortable putting the script while I'm reading when I'm standing. Do you have any recommendations for like MacGyvering something that could work? Whether that's, like running over to the music building and grabbing a music stand and putting it on there, or do you find that there's like a placement that's comfortable on a table, because I'm kind of uncomfortable looking down as I speak into a belly of a mic?
Right, you don't want to look down, for sure. And some people will use their computer and have two screens, one with their recording, their DAW, and then the other one with their script. I've seen it done that way, or you split the screen and you can have your script up here and your recording software on the bottom. That's one way. Some people use their iPad and they'll get an attachment and then they'll hang it. I do it the old-fashioned way. You have to be really careful, though. I just hold paper. I found that's because my space is I don't have a lot of space. So I just have one sheet. It might be a 5-page script, but I just hold one at a time, and I'm just real careful not to rustle the paper, and that works for me because I need to keep an eye, because I'm the recording engineer at the same time I'm being the talent kind of thing, and that can be hard sometimes. But I've got it worked out now that I just hold paper.
Good. I hold it too. It's good to know that I'm not alone in that. I thought.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to hear that you do it too. Any other comments or questions?
Just say, if you're not sure about how to say something, say it both ways, and then pick the best one, because if you have to come in the day later or even later that afternoon and re-record a section, the ambience is going to be different, and it's going to sound like you plugged it in. And, then and if you have to do that, take a whole paragraph at a time instead of just the sentence, so that it flows really well from one to the next.
That's a great tip. The other thing is I've become less shy about asking people how to pronounce things, their name, mostly because you don't want to mispronounce somebody's name, of course, because I'm actually like, working with other people. We interview people, and then I narrate kind of the story of whatever the interview is about. So at first I was a little shy. I was like, oh, I should really know how to say his name, but I've gotten over it. The other thing that I use, let me pull out my magic technology, which I think you all have. So I have, a dictionary on my phone that speaks words that are, common, but I might not know how to say it, or there might be a couple different ways to say it. So I've used that. I use this on occasion. That has been very helpful. But I agree with you. Oh, there's a part in our film where we interviewed this one woman, and maybe I'm the only one who hears it because I'm the audio guy, but 2 different times, and her voice is much lower, and we've cut it where she's, so it's all like it's all continuous, but I can hear which sessions it came from. So yeah, if you can do that, you're not sure, definitely want to pronounce it a few different ways. That's a good tip. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I want to echo what you said about writing a script, but one of the things that I've noticed is to make sure that you write your script in large font with enough space between lines so you can mark it up, and it'll also slow you down.
Yes.
The larger the font and the more space there is between lines, you'll actually talk slower.
That's a great point. I do that too, yeah. So it sounds like we've got some voiceover people here. You do voice work as well?
I have.
Yeah?
I mean, on projects
Yeah.
when at school I was at, yeah.
Anything here surprising? Or, I mean, I feel like it's pretty, common sense stuff, but it's surprising how many people don't know it or don't do it. Or they know it and they like, audio, whatever. Just fixed it later.
So another thing is making sure that if you end up having to edit, that you going back a line and giving yourself time before you start to talk, like making sure you've just got those buffers so that you've got plenty of room to edit.
Yes. Yeah, and I use transitions. That helps too. Definitely. And I edit, not just myself, I edit lots of people because we interview people all over the world. And the audio can come in so many different ways, and often it's not the best quality because some people, the people that we work with are not very technically savvy, so I end up having to use the lowest common denominator, which is usually their cell phone calling into a conference calling place that I have. But I figure it's a podcast, and when you listen to the radio, people call in and you can tell they're on a phone. So I don't stress out about it, but I do try to make what's really important to me, and one of my pet peeves is when I can't understand somebody. So that's one of my most important pieces on this, is just making sure that it's legible, that you can really hear and understand what the person is saying. So that's always my goal. And I succeed most of the time, but sometimes if you've got bad audio, you can't really do much with it. And I've got tools, and sometimes they just don't work either.
I'm actually curious to follow up with you about some of that interviewing process, because not everybody is,
Right there.
comfortable with, not everybody's right there, and not everybody has a speaking style where they're used to projecting or even speaking in a manner that's necessarily, there are a lot of mumblers. Do you, when you interview people, prep them beforehand about sort of like good tips on how to speak when you're interviewing them, or do you just try and catch as much stuff as naturally as possible and then just roll with what you got?
Yeah, we do a pre-talk before we start rolling and give them some tips. I don't want them to, they're already nervous, and I don't want to get the technology in the way. I want them to feel as natural as they can. Over the years, it's gotten a little better, but there are people who will get off mic, and it is what it is. You don't always get like the highest quality that you want, but I'm always looking for that. And like I say, I have some tools. I went to an audio conference once, and I got really lucky. I won this software called Isotope RX, and it's supposed to click a button, fix lots of things. And it does pretty well. I've been able to fix some things that most normal DAWs don't fix, but can't fix everything. Anything else? Okay, well, one more thing. I want to thank you for coming. And you all know what this is, right? Yes, I have a bunch of it in my car. Does anybody want it? Okay. Well, I don't have a whole lot, but I have these 3 big pieces, and then I have this like black garbage bag that's full of smaller pieces. So anybody after you want to come up, we can go over there, and you guys can kind of duke it out for whatever you want. I'm not, but I'm parked in Zone C, so yeah, I didn't get into that one. Anyway. Thank you. So, well, thank you for coming.